Hey, Universus Gamers. This is Frank with the MGLA, accompanied by my good buddy David Thomas, and
How's it going?
we are back at it with Tahk, episode 2, for real this time. Um, this is going to be a shorter video where we're going to talk about the recent Ban and Errata. It's been a few days since it went live. We've formulated some thoughts, and we just figured we'd share them with the world, and we'll dive right into it.
Ooh, important
Um,
question, Frank, before
yeah,
we get into things. So, just so we can set the mood, you got that background music going?
I hit the play button.
Okay,
You're so
there we
you're
go.
so you're so you're so smart. You're such a big
Well,
strong boy.
I know what the people need.
True.
They want them lo-fi beats while they
True,
realize
true, true,
that
true, true,
Ryukyu
true.
is thankfully in a better place, I think.
Yeah. So we've got two characters and we got two non-characters. So we'll start with the characters. Ryukyu. I, for one, didn't see this coming, right? Because we knew she was powerful, but we didn't see her putting up a ton of results, right? We knew a few people, like Jacob Johnson's list, made it while Justin piloted it
Yep.
into the top cuts, and we saw its power level a lot in testing. When I think you and Justin, between your Rodan and his Ryukyu list, were testing back and forth, and that was the all version. That's not even to mention like the Earth version or the Life version that might have been floating around. Um, they have their reasoning down here, but I think in my mind, right, the first thing I thought of, uh, or especially because of the spoiler season for AOT2, was they're going to keep printing blanks, right, because they want to push the draft format. Even if it's a smaller set, there are still some blank cards, and I think they want to avoid pole vaulting Ryukyu even further beyond by like she's already existing, so every time they want to print these blank cards, you're just making her even stronger to be able to say every card in my deck that isn't an action or an asset says draw me a card, get me a momentum, right? I think that's a future state they didn't want to happen.
Yeah, I think there are like a couple parts to it in my head. To talk about the one closer to what you're talking about is it's like if they keep printing all of these blank cards, then it just becomes much easier for her to always make a balanced deck, to put it one way, right? So it's like for most people, they don't care that all these cards are blank, but they have like two mid blocks or like one high block or three low block or whatever. But then if they keep making more and more, then Ryukyu just gets to say, "Oh, I can be really disrespectful with like all of these like high block utility functions, and then just fill out the rest with of her block zones with other useful things." So, or like the blank ones in this case being the useful ones.
Right.
So I think that's one big thing. But to quickly segue into the other part, the thing that I, having gone up against her and just watched her do her mechanics, just the whole idea of that interaction, say with what is it, incredible display, just being able to routinely block, pick up, generate a momentum, block, generate a momentum, especially with vertical maneuvering gear. You could very easily set up a scenario where it's near impossible for the other deck to do anything if you don't have a way to deal with the asset and you can't interact with the foundation incredible display. Like, you're dealing with such a painful defense to work against that yeah, it feels like it'd be just too oppressive. So
Yeah.
this locks that possibility out.
I think what this is also going to do is it's going to force players to be um, more thoughtful about what goes into the deck, right? Because I'm not saying that the decks that we saw performing well were built in a brainless fashion, right? But there's so many auto includes, right? Things that doesn't
Yeah.
that you essentially have to be running. And I think by changing this, you finally can just say I don't ever need to run blank foundations again. I can now put good quality foundations in my deck, and maybe you build this in a different direction. Very quickly, if you haven't already read what's on screen, or if you haven't seen the article, the actual errata was before you could play any card that had no abilities, attacks, or foundations, or anything really, if they ever printed a blank asset, that you would draw a card and you could add a card from hand to momentum. The actual change is now it has to be an attack card, which you can only run so many of those in a deck even if they keep printing more in the future, you're really still not going to be going beyond like 20 to 23 attacks, depending on how big or how aggressive the deck is. So, I mean, I'm still eager to test her in some capacity. And because, again, as I mentioned, you freed up all these foundation slots for like just better foundations that actually do things when they're on the board. So I'm eager to see the new Ryukyus. But I'm also eager to see if they ever print any more blank attacks. What's the symbol on the new blank attack? The Ultra? Is it Chaos?
The Cart Titan
Yeah.
esque one. It might be Order. Sorry, I currently have UVS Ultra up for a
Cart
different
Titan
reason.
Rush. It is a Chaos. Thank God that Ryukyu can't run that card right now.
So the other reason I was up on UVS Ultra is as you started to name out the other things like action, sure, those aren't blank, but I was like, I think there might be a character who could feasibly in retro have had a blank asset, so I'm trying to find that now. It's Bishamon from Darkstalkers. Yeah, he was kind of like Mimic in some of his functionality. So I'm now kind of looking that up, but don't mind me. This will just me off to the side.
Yeah.
No explicit blanks.
So I think that's all that really needs to be said about Ryukyu. I think it's deserving. I think it's good for the future of the game, and I think again it's going to open up some more interesting versions of the deck if she doesn't fall off with some of the new cards.
Yeah, I think a great segue into the next one is it creates less degenerate turn 2 scenarios where you just have massive advantage over your opponent.
Speaking of turn 2 decks, Smiling Titan got a hit. Now, again, another card that I wanted. So this one I wanted, and I was hoping for this, and I wasn't sure if they were going to do anything about it. I was more thinking they were going to hit cards inside the deck rather than the character itself.
Really? What were you thinking, actually?
It's already gotten hit, one of them, but we'll talk about it as we go through the article. But I am thankful for this. We've learned historically, right, that characters that give uniform stats of a high number are really too strong. Now, granted, she does it on one attack usually, or 2 attacks in a turn. She doesn't really play more beyond that early game. But, you know, you could argue that 4-4 to 5-5 on one attack is just as good as 2-2 to 3-3 on 3 to 4 attacks. That, historically, again, Ojiro 2, a deck that I will always bring up, because it was one of my favorites because I piloted it so much. You know, that was another character that they said, we can't let them do both. We have to do one or the other. I am very glad to see this change. I still think it's going to be a strong deck because being able to say, hey, I get to put 4 speed or 4 damage on things. It's not throw gated, so I can just be like, all right, well, all these big throws that are getting printed, I'm just going to put damage on all of them, right? Just throw those out there. And if you don't block them, I get to ready myself again, right? So being forced to pick either or, I think is a great change. I think the deck is still going to be strong and playable. People are just going to have to stop building it in a degenerate fashion, right? They're not just going to unga bunga their way to turn 2s with the 6 to 8 diffs or even the 10 diffs. They're going to have to maybe build out a little bit more and maybe not run as expensive cards. Maybe they bring the threshold of their attack difficulty. Sorry, I'm having trouble finding words today. The threshold of that attack difficulty a little bit lower and play more of the 6s and the 7s rather than the 8s and the 9s.
Yeah, I think the comment that I was thinking about looking over it again now is how there's a little bit more potential counterplay to her other ability as well, where it, like, early on when you were giving stats on both sides, that you could just have this really fast attack that's almost guaranteed to hit her ability, but now if it's only like base 5 damage or something for some reason, but she now has a decision point of, do I put extra speed on it or do I put extra damage? I mean, granted, most are probably gonna have 6 or higher, so speed if you want to guarantee it, but it's not guaranteed anymore.
True, but I think the other side of that conversation, right, is decks that have built-in DR now don't have to worry as much, right? Before it was, okay, if they're going to pick, if they get speed and damage, I can't DR it below 6 sometimes. Whereas now if they're like, well, I want to make this more fast early game, and it's 6 base, I could be like, well, now I can reduce this to 5 or 4 or even lower.
That's a good point.
And not feel as bad. So again, I still think she's really strong. I just don't think she's going to be killing people on turn 2. I mean, she might. I'm sure someone could build a version that can still do something on turn 2, but like, there's so many answers to stuff now. I just don't see that happening.
I don't think she's going to be at the top of the list anymore for like U.S. nationals decks. I think she's there will be people who like playing her and maybe want to relive the glory days, but I would not put her as like my top 3, top 4 pick.
Yeah,
I would see like a rogue one who gets into top.
I would consider, if we were talking about like the tier charts that a lot of the other content creators put out, I would maybe put her bottom tier 1, top tier 2. She's no longer what I would consider tier 0 or S tier, however you want to describe it anymore.
Yeah, very much not 0.
So yeah, I'm very thankful for this. I think again, it was needed. It's the exact same thing essentially that happened with Ojiro, except Ojiro had to work a lot harder to get these stats. But he also got to play for cheap and whatnot. So like,
you sure did.
I sure did.
On you.
It's my fault. Yes, all those events that I won with the deck.
I'm just thinking about, you had 3 diff 8/8s going out, and I'm like,
yeah.
Don't even give me that. But speaking of messed up attacks,
yes, we've moved on to the attack half. As you can see, we've got Risky and Twisting. Risky is a card that, like, from day 0, I was just like, this card's too strong. You shouldn't be able to get to play big damage attacks for not free, but like, is there a real cost when they're dead, when you're killing your opponent?
True.
Like,
yeah,
being able to just say, oh, I get to blow. It's not okay. It is an amalgamation of things, right? If it was just sacrifice 3 to play a 4/4, okay. But the fact that the cost is simultaneously putting you in a position to give it the damage because you are minusing your foundations to pay cost and then playing the card, and then it gets the damage. It just did too much for too low of a cost, like I said, or too low of a price. Especially in like what we saw City Rampage decks that could run this. We saw the Toga decks that could run this very well. And then this was stun 2 in Toga. We saw. I mean, I'm pretty sure even Smiling
Tide I die to this card. Maybe.
Maybe. The Gamer Togas at Atlanta definitely got me with this one as well. No matter how many times I tried to bring in my sideboard materials to bottom deck them, they just always found another one because there's so many. So that's the other thing, is like, there's so many ways to get this card into your bin, because the decks that are running this are also running Combined Firepower, another card that I was kind of hoping was going to be on this list, and Knots Flask. Those cards mill you so much to just say, oh, cool, I get to have all of these Combined Firepowers and I have all these risky encounters. The difference is this one actually is the game ender, right? This one's hitting you for, at minimum 8 usually, but could be as high as like 12 or 14 late game if you're playing a multiple and blowing up your whole board while your opponent's out of resources.
Yeah, I did run into a couple decks doing exactly that. I ran into a Gamer Toga, I think round 3, and the only reason I did not lose is because they checked a 3 when they needed a 4. That's literally the only reason. I was dead to rights otherwise.
Yeah.
And then I fought our good friend Joshua Atkins running Mirko too, and he straight up blew up his entire board. I think took me out game 2 with that.
Man's a legend, honestly.
I will say, in terms of the card, we don't do erratas for attacks, I think, at all. If at
I don't think
most often.
Any attack, they only have ever, in my time at least, have only ever errated characters since the rebranding and the MHA set 1 came out. And attacks and foundations and whatnot have always been banned.
But if I was to propose an errata, it is a bit of a non-bow, because it's clear that there is meant to be a synergy between the blitz and the form. But I think to make it survivable, from the part that I really like, which is give yourself the opportunity to play yet another attack if you need it. I think if you could just say in the blitz, if you played this from your hand,
that's exactly what I was just about to say. Okay,
yeah,
we're
we're sharing the same brain cell again.
I think that would be totally fair. And I don't think it's a non-bow. I think it's a decision point, right? It's like, oh, cool, I have this really cool 4 high for stun 1. Yes, it's a 5 diff, but it's gonna have at least +1 or +2 damage, right? Depending on how your deck build is made up. and then you still get to play another 4 high forward stun one later on low progressive, and you probably just build more damage pump or stat pump in the deck itself.
Like to me, as a like thinking of the gameplay experience, the way I would want people to think about this card is thinking, oh, it's in my discard, I have just that little bit more to get it done. Not, oh, it's in my discard, I'm going to clean your clock when you choose to block too much.
The other thing we can compare this to is, right, so let's say this is essentially a 3 diff attack, right? Let's just visualize this as a 3 diff attack. No 3 diff attack should by itself be able to be a 10 damage or greater. Like, I just don't think any 3 diff attack should be. I mean, hell, even in back when I was playing Ojiro 2, when I was playing the 3 diffs, the most I got them was to like 7 or 8 damage.
It was 8. Right? It was 8.
Okay. I see. I've heard you. I've heard you.
It was it was 3/3, gave +3/3, and then it was the third card in your card pool, so you give it +2/2.
Yeah.
I sure remember.
Yeah, that card was fun. But still, right? That required my character to give stats, and it required it to be in a specific point to give stats in the card pool. If otherwise it was like a middling card, right? And it was a card that actually got cut. But again, a 3 diff attack shouldn't by itself just get to say, hey, this is a 10 damage move with stun 1, and you've used all of your resources already on all the other attacks. You are dead. It is over for you. I just don't think that should exist, and I'm glad that they hit this. I don't want to say as quickly as they did, right? Because we still had to suffer through an event, but we needed to see the data, right? That's a big thing with this game. Is I'm hoping that we get to see more and more of it. Is we get to see more data that shows, okay, this card was in like over 50% of top cut decks, and historically what they've done is they've just looked at character representation, but like you really should be looking more at like deck makeup. Combined Firepower was one of those other cards that I thought was going to be on the chopping block, because again, it was in a lot of decks, maybe not as many as this one, but like I feel like those two cards are interchangeable, right? I think the other big difference, right, is the attune. The attune ability or this being an attune card, meaning you can just slot it into any death character regardless of your primary symbol, means that even non-combined firepower decks would just be like, I'm gonna run this. This card's great.
It does exactly what I said of it's just another attack, but by virtue of the fact that they're probably now tuning their deck a little bit around their own foundation destruction, they get so much more power out of it and sometimes egregious way. So it starts skewing us towards this really weird like self-destruction format where half the matches end with people having nuked their entire board and say, well, I guess I'll have to play the next turn without one if we get there.
Exactly, yeah. I think it's funny that they mentioned the death symbol casino decks, but the casino aspect is more so the combined firepower piece, but also all the death foundations that have like when destroyed or when hits discard pile effects. So it's interesting that they use that as the justification, as part of the justification for this, when it's really the things that you're blowing up that make it casino, or the randomness of those cards.
I will tell you the most frustrating experience I had of a deck with that, funny enough, is Kevin Broberg's Irwin deck, specifically all of the interactions you're talking about when he would combine firepower, and then out of nowhere, I'm committing 2 face-up foundations, another one is sealed, and I'm like, I don't know what just happened.
Yep.
My game plan has gone completely out the window because my 3 best defensive tools have just gone sideways.
Yeah. I would not be surprised if combined firepower sees a hit in the future. The only issue with that being it's a starter deck card, or it's a challenger deck card, right? And historically, we've never seen a challenger deck card or starter deck card, at least in the current standard format or in the Universus game. Get hit. So I don't see that changing, but I would like it to. I totally understand the argument.
Errata.
Yeah, but I can understand why they wouldn't want to do that, being a pre-con card. Because we had the same issue back in the Dragon Ball Super card game. There was this character Vegex who was a starter deck character, and he was a mill deck that did stuff based off of the discard, and he was just too strong. You got too much free stuff for milling, and he was topping like every event consistently. There were a lot of representation of the card, and it was a very feels bad deck to deal with. But they didn't do anything to the character for so long. It took them forever to actually hit him because he was a starter deck character. They didn't want to tell people, hey, this deck is useless for you to buy. Don't buy this product that we're still pushing to shelves. So I get it. I get why they might not do that. I hope Universus goes in a different direction because I still think that card's going to become more of a problem if they ever print more of these casino-y style cards.
Well, speaking of cards that were problems and reaching the end of their life cycle, great segue, Frank. High five.
Yeah. Totally planned. Twisting Azure Inferno. This card should have gone much sooner, in my opinion, in a lot of people's opinion. Note that while it is Kevin Broberg, and he is a monster among men in a good way, most of his first places in the last years, or however long it's been, have had this card. Because was this not in the Death Eraserhead list?
For which? I just don't remember.
One of the events that he had topped last. Maybe it was Rochester.
Maybe I can look up.
Yeah, I don't know if we could actually pull the list. It wasn't a 4X. I think he had at least 2 of them. But I just think it's funny that. Oh wait, was this not in the Irwin list? Am I just talking out the wazoo here?
Maybe
I'm still focused on the risky account. Maybe I'm still just like.
Let me double check. So Kevin 4X'd twisting in his Atlanta deck.
Does UVS have Rochester from last year?
Oh, they probably should.
2023. Oceania. Rochester. Rochester was Momo.
Yeah,
but it was last year.
Momu versus Nomu, right?
Okay, correct. What was his? Where did he top with Eraserhead? He had the Death Eraserhead Grenadier Bracers Shenanigans deck.
RLE Las Vegas. And yeah, this was the okay.
It was 4X. Okay, yeah. So I know what I'm talking about. Sometimes. So I'm just saying. I think it's funny that his last 2 first places at an RLE were both with a death blow up stuff Twisting Azure Inferno deck. So I think that speaks to the power of the card. One of the first things I do want to point out is this is a card that was strong enough to be banned in Retro. Now, granted, Retro being a different format, it's a different animal, right? We look at the card not by itself, but what enables the card, right? And obviously, you're not going to ban 10 other cards that make this one card better. But Retro had so many actions that you could just play for free on turn 1 or turn 2 that would just boost this up by 1,000,000 damage, right? So, like, because of all of that, they had to eventually hit this. I mean, even in my rando deck, I was running this because it just said, hey, when I get enough damage on my cards, which rando is a character that pumps speed and damage on everything, I get to make my checks easier. In a character that also just makes my checks easier based off of his enhance. So, like, I can understand why it was banned in Retro, but now in the standard format, we have hit this critical mass where there are so many cards that turned this on, that enable Twisting Azure as a core piece of your deck, right? It's not a nice to have. You are building around being able to pump this with damage, and then pump your opponent full of lead with Twisting Azure, Riskies, and all the other attacks that have been surrounding it. It's especially with combined firepower resisting, it's just too easy to enable this card. Travis, another person, with his first place performance with Elder Toguro. I almost said younger because he's the tiny one, but as a fan, I know better.
I was gonna say
it's another, like, it enabled. Sure, it was doing something different than what maybe Broberg's list was doing, because Broberg's was more of a string deck. But it was still doing crazy things with just the responsibility, not even the check hacking, as we call it. So I think I'm happy to see it go. I think it's late, right? It's good that this is going to go for Nats for all the homies that are going to be playing it on our team. Don't have to play against it or test with it on our team. and everyone else out there that hated this card, because this does rotate early next year, of course. I would have liked to see this go sooner. I think the reason it didn't go sooner is because people weren't taking advantage of it the way they should have. Obviously, Kevin understood its power time and time again. Travis understood its power.
I don't know. Okay, hold on. Sorry, I was like 60-70% listening to you. I'll be honest, because you were off on your rando joint again. I was busy looking up lists on the other side, just to because I am a Rochester guy at heart as well. Yes, you can't stop me. I wanted to defend Kevin's honor, just like, no. Where else has he been performing that wasn't on Twisted Deck? He was on Amajiki, got third place at Yada event. Where was it?
Sure, that's first. I'm talking specifically about first places.
Oh, sorry, Kevin isn't winning 6, so you could have multiple data points to work with. Apologies, I'll tell him to kick.
I wasn't saying this in a negative connotation. I just thought it was funny because he realized the power of the card, and because he understood how good the card was, and because that's the thing is, people weren't running it, but the people who were running it, or knew how to actually take advantage of the card, they were getting first place with it.
Okay, maybe we're in some sort of echo chamber or something, but I always feel like people were constantly running this card with the people we test with or work with, because it just felt so oppressively good. And
I felt like no one was taking it to events though. We tested it, but Worlds last year, right? Justin and I landed on Mount Lady, right? That's you at Atlanta landed on Rodan. Travis decided to play Rodan instead of the Toguro deck again, but that's because he didn't need to. Mike went and I were on Mount Lady 3 again, 2 again, for Atlanta. Heck, I was still on Mount Lady for St. Louis. No one on our team was running twisting, except for Travis at St. Louis and Justin at St. Louis, because I think at St. Louis Justin brought back his Chaos Mimic deck. Mm-hmm. But I have very rarely come across this card in the events that I've gone to. I just don't think people were taking advantage of it or not seeing the lines. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I'm completely wrong, and I'm happy to be wrong. I'm just saying, I haven't seen its representation as much, and I think that's why. And when I talk about representation, I mean it wasn't topping with numbers, right? How many twisting decks topped Atlanta? How many twisting decks topped St. Louis? How many twisting decks topped what was the other one? Las Vegas. That was the other one we had earlier this year. And to my understanding, it was just the 2, right?
Taking a look now.
I think we should double check on that, but I'm pretty sure it was just the 2.
Let's see here. So the Aaron in Atlanta ran it at 4x.
I forgot there was an Aaron in Atlanta.
There was indeed an Aaron.
Okay, so that's
Atlanta. 2. And I think that's just the 2 in top 16 that I can see. But yeah, there's probably more. We can save it. I know we're already coming up to half an hour on this, so don't want to belabor the point. Personal guess is that this is just outside of everything we've already seen, this is just more the fact of we had Big Bert in the room with this card check hacking on 3 foundations, right? And you're not blocking anything, or as we had seen in some of our testing, no, you just go off on the front side, you -2 everything to them because you play 2 twistings, you're just cycling every single attack, and you just kill them because they can't keep up with 6 attacks instead. So I see that the most likely the decision was made as a preemptive measure to not have AOT2 at US Nats just cause everything to go sideways. And not to have people test for so long in a format which was going to inevitably shift. So I'm okay with this. For the people who are sad they don't get to play their Twisting Azure Inferno cards, signed or not, I'm sorry, Mike.
It's funny, they actually mentioned in the article that it seemed to come and go rapidly from popular, or it came and go rapidly from popular to absent from the meta. Which is, again, kind of exactly that point I was trying to make.
Yeah.
But when it did show up, it was bonkers.
Yes.
So I'm glad that they saw that, and I'm happy to see it go. I'm happy to see Risky go. The characters, I mean, I don't know about you. I think they're great. I think the only thing that I'm hoping we see the next time around is, and we talk about it all the time in the Discord, is I would very much like to see Bertold go. Luckily for me, I don't have to compete for. I shouldn't say I don't have to. I cannot compete until like Critical Role comes out. So I don't have to deal with it, but I certainly hope that card gets hit. But I don't know necessarily anything else that I would have on a wish list. I just think like there's not as many turn 2 decks anymore with these pieces gone, but Bertold gets to just like do it if he wants to, and I just think that's not fun. But outside of that, I think everything else that they've printed or are going to be printing, because I know we got some Star Trek reveals today as well, and I just think it all looks cool, super neat, and I don't think any of it lends to a turn 2 deck, except for so that's the only other thing I can think of.
I personally, also not competing at Nats, but I personally, for a competitive format, prefer a bit of a longer one myself. I like these things where they say their aim is for games to go to like 5-6 turns, I would assume, each. That sounds good to me. I would consider that like a shorter-ish game, like for where I would like to sit on things.
Right.
But at the same time, of course, we don't want tournaments to take absolutely like massive amounts of time and don't want everyone going to time. So I know it's a delicate game balance you have to play, especially if you want to keep up a best of 3 format.
For sure.
We'll see how that turns out.
Well, this has been another fantastic episode of Cahd Talk. I am excited to see what happens and what deck ideas come out now that we have a bit more breathing room with some of the broken cards gone. And we just got a bunch of the new cards from AOT2. So I'm very excited. In the meantime, David and I are going to help the team with testing. We will be back with something for episode 3. We got to mull that one over. But until then, this is Frank and David of the Metagame Liberation Army signing off.
Catch you later.